Hi, my name's Will Lowe. I am Director of Partnerships at Payhawk, and welcome to the AI in Finance podcast. If you're a CFO or finance leader, you're typically scaling across multiple markets. You felt it. More systems, more complexity, more pressure to move faster, but typically without adding headcount. We all know that challenge. Today in this podcast, we're going to be unpacking what AI in finance actually looks like and sharing real practical advice. What's real? What's hype? And where do your teams get quick wins without breaking compliance? I'm delighted today to be joined by Robbie Hadfield from Payhawk and Joonas Sipola, COO at Staria. These guys both live and breathe global finance transformation, and we're really going to get into that today. So just to give you a bit of background, Robbie Hadfield is a general manager at Payhawk, leading various teams in the organization, including rolling out 2 new AI products, Travel and Financial Controller, and he also leads our solution engineering team. He brings a wealth of experience in the finance field as a chartered accountant, having held financial controller and head of finance roles across large organizations and startups. Joonas Sipola is an experienced finance and operations leader, having held multiple senior finance roles, including several CFO positions. He is a strong advocate for the use of AI in finance and currently serves as CEO at Staria, where he led the company's AI transformation, drove an AI adoption to over 95% across the organization. So with that, welcome Robbie and Joonas. Let's get straight into it. If you can give me a bit of a flavor of what do Payhawk and Staria do, and what do your companies respectively do to help, specifically around the AI topic?
Joonas, after you.
Yeah, thank you, Robbie, and thanks for invitation for the discussion. And,
no problem. Great to have you on.
Happy to be here. So Staria, we are the leading Europe's leading NetSuite provider, and hundreds of CFOs like myself in the past, responsible of the fast-growing global companies, have chosen us as their global and local one-stop shop partner, whether it's in accounting, payroll, global accounting, or NetSuite, or business intelligence services. And naturally, all of that relates nowadays to AI. So that's in brief what we at Staria do.
Awesome. Great to hear. Robbie?
Yeah, so Payhawk are a global spend management solution. So across accounts payable, cards and expenses, but also looking to extend into other product offerings such as travel. And this is where with AI, it's a great opportunity for us to really drive efficiencies, better outcomes for our customers, and ultimately be very AI-led in terms of some of these core finance processes, which in the past have been very manual. So yeah, that's where we're going, and hopefully drive a lot of value for our customers.
Brilliant. It'd be great to dig into that in terms of both businesses as we go. Like to kind of pull it back a little bit and talk about CFOs. You both had experience either working with CFOs or being CFOs. So in terms of what, if we're looking at the CFO and looking at the lens, what do CFOs hope AI means today, what versus what it actually means? So what do they want it to mean to what it actually means today?
That's an excellent and really good question in that sense that it's a totally different 2 things that we are talking about in many cases. So of course the hopes, they come quite fast. It's always like everything should be automated and with less costs, faster, better quality, and so full AI, everything needs to be. Or then another approach is that just give me something with AI. So
yeah,
that's the
get that.
You've heard probably that as well, Robbie. How many times?
Yeah, I have. I think the thing is, if you're thinking as a finance leader, the story for the last 10, 15, if not 20 years has been CFOs need to be more strategic, your business partners, your value adding, you're not a backwards looking accountant anymore. It's very much a strategic advisor in the organization. And this is where that transition has very much led CFOs to be board reporting is probably their make or break to an extent for most CFOs, especially for first-time CFOs, the way they do reporting, the way they partner across the organization. But I think what that's come with is a lot of challenges. Have I got the right data? Am I getting insights out to the organization quick enough, etc.? And this is kind of the promise of AI, that productivity, sort of streamlining a lot of these processes, because even today, I see a lot of CFOs, if you actually look at sort of their investment decisions on headcount, probably 70% of that headcount is still very much in the financial accounting processes of the organization rather than the FP&A and the business partnering. So I think that's kind of the hope for AI, I think, is maybe changing that investment decision to keep that sort of trajectory going of the finance function being a value-add enabler in the organization rather than a financial accounting, bookkeeping sort of function.
You mentioned hope. Hope's certainly not a strategy. We all know that. But well, how do we cut through the noise of like gimmicky AI versus actually practical, real AI that makes a difference? Because I think we are in a bubble, whether we like to talk it or not, and there are going to be winners and there are going to be losers. AI is not going away, but like it is quite hard to sometimes cut through the noise of what's gimmicky and what's real and going to make a meaningful impact to businesses. So I don't know if you guys have got a perspective on that.
Yeah, I like to think that come to this topic out of the how you see the human in that context as well. So once someone is talking about that, it's like a full AI, no human touch, then it starts to be a bit bubblish stuff. So, but if we should be, or when we are talking about hybrid human digital workforce kind of an approach, so that it's not a replacement, but a companion or way to work in a new way, orchestrate the work together with humans. And then it starts to make sense. And it's something that we have done earlier with different tools. RPA 10 years ago, internet 30 years ago, and so on, all the systems. So it's nothing new in that sense. And the reality is that that's how we should approach that. And something I'll still take a bit step back on what you, Robbie, said earlier. It's quite interesting that the systems and the data landscape renewal that needs to happen first. There are lots of organizations who really, they are sitting on top of that 70% of team is still doing accounting. That is maybe a system on-premise system somewhere acquired 30 years ago or so on, without any potential of doing any automation even. So there's a huge debt in many organizations as well to develop all that. That's the reality, and they don't have any data ownership strategy or processes might be there. Controls might be there, but this is the reality. And now to transfer fully from that kind of reality to totally different kind of way of working, it's quite a step. And if we are then talking about only how can we do it cost effectively or so on, so it might lead to not so good results. What do you think, Robbie?
I think there's one point I'd love to sort of jump on there from Joonas, is sort of how people in AI work in collaboration rather than full AI replacement, is how they collaborate there. And what I sort of see is the opportunity for the human to be the reviewer in a process a lot more than the doer that they used to be. And I think Joonas is right to say we've already seen that kind of change before. I think when ERP systems first came out, that had a huge change on ways of working, and you didn't need to have such a grounded background in double entry bookkeeping because the ERP actually does half of it for you, for instance. But that's where I see sort of the biggest opportunity with AI is becoming the doer in the process and then the human reviewer. But I think with all these things, there's always pros and cons to this. There's a huge efficiency gain, but then the worry that sort of strikes me is, do you remove the entry level learning pathway for someone to actually have the right skills and knowledge to be an adequate reviewer of a process? That's the worry that I would have. But in terms of cutting through the gimmick of AI, I do think ultimately the biggest challenge to address for AI is how do they build trust on a day-to-day basis with that human-led collaboration. So that would be my comment there. But I think there's a really good point there that Joonas makes, which is about how AI and the person can work together. But I do see AI being the doer, increasingly the doer in many finance processes.
Yeah, definitely around any mundane task. And I think the example you gave around the internet and the ERPs and how that, helped maybe at first those people were going in there with a bit of trepidation. And even if you look at the Industrial Revolution, which the AI revolution is quite similar. If you looked at one tiny thing in many, like the spinning jenny, which was for textile workers were really, really concerned at the time that this was going to replace them. It didn't do that. In fact, it allowed them to work better in a more efficient way, and it effectively multiplied them rather than take their jobs. So this is how, it's very similar to the AI and the way that I see it. What's your commentary around people's fear of AI and what do they need to do? What would your advice be on how to embrace it and do the best for their business? Either one of you can answer that.
Yeah, the doer viewer analogy, it's quite interesting.
Maybe my analogy is old, I don't know, but it's I did the Industrial Revolution at school. Yeah. It's like it was a thing that I know there was a lot of fear around. AI is similar. Yeah. It's just a good example of something people were scared of. They'd have been scared of the internet. They'd have been scared of ERP. It's just an example.
I think the big topic here, whether AI is going to replace you or how you should be seeing you in a finance in the future, is that how ready you are to adapt or change your way of working in that sense. It could be so that the AI is now the doer and you are viewing or controlling it. But either way, you should be questioning everything that you do. In that sense, we just had a workshop with a couple of accountants, and they saw it quite the opposite, that the AI could actually do a lot of controls, so that they would do the work because it couldn't be due to the not too mature processes. It couldn't be automated, so they still need to do a lot of stuff, but AI could control them, so that we don't have to. You have the control matrix, the SOX control. So
it's like a perspective thing you're saying. It depends on where you're thinking about this thing. How you
exactly. And if you can think about different scenarios, how and what you shouldn't love too much what you're doing nowadays. And I've said to a couple of my managers that try to hire someone who is lazy enough to take as much AI processes into use and to find the potential for those. The lazy people could be actually the future.
Anytime soon, Joonas, but I get the point.
Yeah.
Robbie, any comment around that? Thanks, Joonas.
Yeah. I think I know for me and many sort of customers I speak to on a daily basis, they've struggled to kind of adopt AI at times because there's no playbook for it yet. Because I think the whole world's trying to work out how to use AI at the same time, to an extent. And there's this fabulous new tool, but no one's got the exact ways of working. I think the original sort of use cases that we saw AI do brilliantly was summarization, analysis of big data, sort of getting those things. And do they always link into finance perfectly? No. But I suppose for me personally, anything that you sort of see yourself taking 5-10 hours or even dreading a process. And I'm thinking back into my sort of previous careers here, thinking of doing an intercompany reconciliation across 7 entities and 3 currencies, for instance, or bank reconciliations at times at high volumes. These are the tasks you used to dread, which were very manual, very time consuming but still relatively basic in nature. And I think that's where it's easy to say, but encourage people to think if they don't like a task, or I think it's the lazy comment kicks in here, if they don't like it or if they're dreading it, this is where you can kind of apply AI to it and see what efficiencies you can gain there. And it can be pretty staggering, some of the results you get. I know for me personally, I had some processes last week which I thought would take me 10 to 15 hours. By bringing AI into it, it became a sort of a 5-minute one. It can be very surprising the results you get, but you don't know until you try. But I think it's also important, Will, to sort of, when you're giving this opportunity to AI, you need to be in control of what the expected outcome is. And this is where, in a lot of the processes I mentioned earlier, there is actually a right answer at the end, which therefore makes it easier to be the reviewer. Because I'm one of those sort of skeptics at times, which is this needs to be auditable, this needs to be testable, etc., etc. So if I was adopting AI, I'd want to do it in a safe scenario, which I feel in control of still.
Yeah, AI sometimes feels like we're flying the plane while building it. Definitely, we're finding our feet as we go. So I think we're all in agreement that AI matters. So what do you think's changed in the last 12, 18 months? What's made AI urgent? I mean, I see this in the workplace now. You know, look at 24 months ago. Yeah, we could see AI coming in. Now it's in everything I do. And to your point, Robbie, yeah, a lot of those mundane tasks that could take a long time, you know, I'm getting through that really, really quick. So it'd be good to get both your perspectives on what you feel's changed in the world in the last 12, 18 months that's made AI urgent.
4 years ago, we started to build our RAG model to run internal operations more efficiently so that we could get our own LLM. Nobody pretty much could do it. And well, we got it done. Another example, 3 years ago, I got asked for the first quotes for AI agents. And the price tag for one process was something like 30,000 euro with pilot phase, and the licenses were 100,000 euro for one process.
Wow.
If you compare it now, so it's pretty much like a plug and play in many senses. It's really much easier to take it into use. There's ready-made solutions. The MCP servers are in many systems, so AI can really like communicate with systems, or you can communicate through the AI chat app with natural language with different systems. The integrations they are so much better, and now the agentic approach, which you guys are doing a lot. So that has really changed the playground here, and of course that bringing the operating model, how we operate the AI, and there are like best practices for that, which lets for better quality. And to that topic that Robbie, you mentioned, that it's all about trust. So we are starting to trust a bit the AI, both of course using it personally for finding the best recipe for salmon soup and making it happen.
I've not done that yet, but maybe I will after this.
And once you do that at your like a home and with your personal life, you'll start. It's easier to trust the business applications as well.
Robbie, what's your take? Obviously, I mentioned at the start, agentic AI. We've had generative AI within Payhawk for a while. Agentic is something that we launched fairly recently, 12 to 18 months ago. You know, the world has changed since then. So what's your viewpoint, one, on the world, and then you might want to give examples within your role as GM, at Payhawk.
Yeah, I think the fact it's natural language, I think, is a key enabler in the world, which is, and obviously ChatGPT did this first. Actually, being more natural language makes it far easier to adopt, because previously, sort of with new technologies, it's always, do you actually need to be a developer? Do you need to know how to code to actually adopt certain tools sometimes? But yeah, I think in the world of sort of thinking about it in Payhawk and our kind of agentic kind of world, a lot of our focus has been how to increase adoption of processes, because as a sort of a finance professional myself, you're very conscious of the finance versus non-finance kind of relationship in companies and sort of the frictions that you can get. And this is where, if you look at sort of finance systems generally, they're quite scary to non-finance people.
Yeah.
A lot of them look like Excel. So many of them still are Excel in some forms. But I think this is where, with an agentic approach, you actually give the ability for non-finance users to adopt finance tools more easily. And actually, I think it's going to be really interesting that you've got a lot of highly configured tools in the world now with a lot of different automation logics. If I'm looking at like a NetSuite or a Business Central, there's probably about 10 ways of doing everything in those systems. But it can be very hard to adopt those systems if you're not a consultant. So I'm really interested to see how sort of agentic AIs can really help adoption of complex tools or complex logics, which previously you'd need to be a subject matter expert in that tool to actually adopt fully. So I think that's the game changer, is natural language, the chat kind of based experience. It does unlock avenues to other ways of adoption, rather than having to be a subject matter expert, which I think was the norm.
Yeah,
everything tends to be really fast nowadays. So like within NetSuite or within your tool, so we can already command NetSuite with natural language. I can do stuff. I'm not a coder, but I can already do stuff that through MCP server we can connect to NetSuite, and I can give it a prompt and it gives me the answer or a report, whatever it needs. And I can prompt or inject already data into NetSuite through the like a chat app. So that didn't happen 6 months or one year ago. And I always had to call to some consultant, could you do this? Because I'm just a CFO who doesn't know anything about coding. So
yeah, but you don't need to know. You've got Whisper, you can voice command it, you could vibe code it. You don't need to, you just need to understand it to some of the points that you guys said earlier. But yeah, it's rapidly changing. And then on that rapidly changing piece, so a lot of the emphasis of AI is globally growing fast, scaling. So when you guys have done that, you've either transformed within Staria or you're heading up AI initiatives within Payhawk. So when scaling globally, what breaks first? People, processes, systems, or data?
All of the above.
Yeah, we might have different answer on this. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it depends on the scenario, because I've sort of seen different things happen with different teams. I have personal experience where the order was, well, we had a process which worked, the data was fine, but we kept throwing more people at the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually then the system breaks. And this is something that I think happens quite often in sort of the ERP transition. There's a huge one that happens between like a Xero or a QuickBooks Online moving to the first ERP, whether that be NetSuite, Business Central, Intact, or whatever, because that's such a huge change in the ways of working because of sort of the scale, the cross-entity nature. That's a big one but I often think the system breaks sort of last in that one, because people try to stay on the original tool for as long as possible. But then at the same time, I've seen it the other way, where if there is, sometimes it is just the process that breaks first, then the people. So it depends on the situation. But I know from a finance perspective, I think finance professionals can be a little bit guilty of delaying the system change for as long as possible, because it's what they're used to, and they'll make an excuse. Let's do it for the next financial year or the next VAT quarter or whatever. But actually, there's often delay of the system change, I would say.
That's interesting, though, because the psychology of those people is typically what you're saying, and I don't want to speak out for, for everyone, but like, is there a little bit more risk averse? Maybe it's fair to say, maybe they want to stick to systems. Not everybody, obviously. So AI kind of changes the game for finance teams there. So it'd be interesting to see what your thoughts are around that, in terms of, these are people that tend to want to stick with systems, are risk averse. AI is a different proposition. What would the advice be to finance teams on how to best adopt it, I suppose?
The thing is, it's the risk of transition of data. I think the biggest risk in finance functions is, if you are changing tools, is the risk of migration is often the biggest risk. Especially if you've reached a certain size of company where you're audited, it makes a real difference. And that's often one of the real reasons why you don't shift, is because of the risk of migration is often higher than the benefits of change sometimes. And it has to hit a...
Is AI forcing that? Like, even if you want to do that, is it like you don't really have like you're being pushed, or if you don't do it, you're behind? So like, it's just a different complexity now with where we've been in the past.
I think AI gives the opportunity to clean data quicker, because it's very good at anomaly detection. It'll be very good at helping assist those migrations. So I think it removes a blocker on the transition, but it's still the case that you can't just immediately adopt a new tool if your data in the first place is nonsense. I think garbage in, garbage out is still valid as a concept here. And I know, I'm just, obviously, Joonas will know better than I, given sort of they're implementing a lot of these softwares. But yeah, data migration, I can imagine, is the biggest hurdle and the most timing consuming thing in a project, if you're going from an SME business up to a sort of with that ERP.
And Joonas, can you give us so you've obviously, as I said at the start, transformed Staria. I understand like 95% now AI connected projects. Can you give us a bit of sense to Robbie's point around data? So what are the biggest data issues blocking adoption? When you went on that journey from we're a bit risk averse to now we're 95% of the business using AI. Can you give us a sense of?
Yeah. I think, Robbie, you nailed it with the garbage in, garbage out comment. That what I've seen and we've seen in hundreds of transformations, it might be just that like companies are growing internationally, you need to change something. Often the data migration, it could be done in quite a good fashion, but the processes are not adapted to new way of working or new tool set or for AI. So people tend to be quite inventive, adaptive, and they know what to prioritize, and then they use the systems quite innovatively. So they might start to use the system a bit differently, and they can even manipulate the data. In the Excel, once they've taken it out of the system, it doesn't anymore support you. But then the processes, those often become too manual, and those tend to break first, in my opinion. And that's why the adaptation doesn't work, because you're not seeing the process as the root cause. And then this poor data coming out of poor process, garbage in, garbage out. So start to lead a wave of these kind of replacements. It can be replacement of systems or people. People are too tired or incapable of doing anymore the transformation. So it's like Robbie, you said, it's a bit complex problem, but I think it always starts out of the processes. And if you're not thinking while doing the AI transformation as well, or ERP transformation, whatever it is, you should always think about the process. What are you trying to achieve? If you take the new expense or spend management, probably with this new era and new systems like yours, your modern systems, so probably it's good to think about the whole spend management a bit differently, how it works, in order to get the best possible results. So,
and we obviously love working with Staria as well. So I don't know, if either Robbie or Joonas, if you want to speak about like how Payhawk and Staria create best impact together. Maybe you can give an example of like a workflow where we've connected the ERP to the spend management and automated that. I don't know if you want to give some flavor.
Yeah, I'll go first here. So from a Payhawk perspective, working with sort of the implementer or the consultant of the client is often really crucial, and it gives you a lot of options, because in these systems, it can be hard to integrate with every single module of an ERP. I mean, they're huge. There's so many different things. And often what Payhawk can do well is adoption of a process, getting end users involved, capturing data at first, getting it into the right place in the ERP. That's where sort of working with Staria makes a big difference, because the ability to just copy a value over to another field, which then triggers another script in NetSuite, which then automates a process, it can be really crucial. I've seen this a lot in project accounting, for instance. I've seen that there. I've seen it sort of in withholding tax examples in some complex jurisdictions. So this is where I know from a Payhawk perspective, our ability to capture sort of lots of different fields then gives us a lot of flexibility to then work with sort of Staria to then ultimately help to automate other processes within the ERP as well. And sometimes it's the case where the ERP can actually solve a problem for you that Payhawk may not be always perfect to cover. There is that kind of looking at the whiteboard and seeing, if you take a higher level view of the process, you can actually, it's not always the solution needs to be in Payhawk. Sometimes the solution actually needs to be in the ERP itself. So yeah, a few examples there that I can think of, but yeah, there's definitely been some great examples of collaboration, and appreciated that.
Yeah, and the wider bit of that conversation, I suppose, where the narrative in the past was everything in the ERP, that's changed. So like AI is accelerating that more in terms of the functionality it can give you above and beyond it being like their central record, central finance. It's the world's changing in terms of the way that ERP and AI and products like Payhawk work around that. Okay, cool. So that's really good in terms of understanding a bit around practical playbook, why it matters. Let's get on to adoption. So obviously, Joonas, probably great to start with you. You've done a tremendous job in terms of transforming Staria from within. So can you give some advice in terms of, would you go big bang or start small? What, in your opinion, would like a smart 90-day plan? If I'm a CFO or a finance leader, do I start small? Do I go big bang? And what would that like 90-day plan look like just from your experience? And then Robbie, if you can give your perspective after that, that'd be great.
Yeah, a concrete way how we work. So of course, we've done a lot of things already past. We used to work with RPA 10 years ago, and with machine learning models since 2017 and so on. So it doesn't change too much. But how we do things, it's like we have a 4 or 5 step program for each AI use case and adapting to those. So first we do the identification and prioritization so that we score or we write the story card. If you can write it in one card, and then it's easy to automate or easy to create as an AI. If you cannot fit it in one card, probably it's too big of a problem. Then you can you should build some kind of scoring so that it has a business case. Secondly, we use the solution design and development so that we create the detailed designs and we build and test the AI agents or whatever AI usage it is, and prepare the documentation. And the most important part, create the training and user guidelines. So this is often that we forgot once we go to the third step, the implementation and integration into the reality. So once we deploy the AI solutions and so providing the trainings, because it changes a lot how you do it. So that's the important part. And then the communication. You need to communicate a lot because people are still scared. Does this small AI agent take my job, or what happens there? And then tracking the results and outcomes, so that we have KPIs for each AI agent. I tend to think about this so that if it's 90 days, you're recruiting a new team member. You should think this AI as a new team member. You should do all the same stuff.
You're onboarding the AI, basically, yeah?
Exactly. So within 90 days, you have onboarded, you have recruited, onboarded, and so on, and made a decision if it works or not. So that's how I like to think the AI adoption, and if it's a big course.
It's communication to everyone, making sure everyone's on board. It's treating it like onboarding the AI. It's about process. So all those things combined make it a much smoother transition. Makes sense.
There was a quite recent, like a KPMG study or their how they like to approach this. It's just like a managing digital talent. So make the same things than you do to the human talent. So onboard, learn, upskill, performance measurement. All this should fit into the 90 days, and like we spoke earlier with Robbie, that things are getting quite fast. So, but be precise. Don't go just do all AI. Do some specific stuff that you can do. So.
And then, Robbie, from your start, I mean, obviously you've rolled out agentic, generative, big bang. I think we've gone big bang. But your perspective on what does that smart 90-day rollout look like in terms of adoption of AI for a business?
Yeah, I think it's first important to sort of assess, is it a new process? So a new problem you're trying to solve, or is it an existing problem? Okay, if it's an existing one, ultimately your KPIs for success are going to be, are we more efficient? Are we delivering higher quality? So it's kind of, that would be if it's an existing process. And I can think of a lot of finance processes like that. And actually, to be fair, some of the agentic workflows we brought into Payhawk are like that, with the financial controller agent, with receipts chasing. Ultimately, it's chasing employees for receipts, getting them in quicker. It's an existing problem. We've had a lot of different adoption mechanisms in the past, whether it be a mobile app, whether it be Slack, whatever. But actually giving another option to sort of aid that user experience, it's clear to measure what impact you can have. If it's a new problem, and I can think of a few here in finance, which is probably more on the FP&A side, I think giving is then a bit more of an experimental kind of rollout initially. But I do think it's relevant to not go with too wide a scope. You've got to be very defined in your problem statement so that you know what your expected outcomes and goals are, so that you can actually measure success. Otherwise, you're just playing with something rather than actually knowing that you've driven value. because ultimately, with each AI rollout you do in an organization, you've got to prove that you've added value in order to build trust that people are going to keep using that method of automation.
So define processes, outcomes, measurement, and then communication. I think jointly you kind of both said those things. Really important. Doesn't really start if you start small, if you start big, it doesn't really matter. You just got to follow. You've got to have a defined outcome, process, measurement, and continual communication, and treat AI like it's your onboarding a new employee. Great feedback. Awesome. Great. So on closing, I want to thank you both. It's been really, really useful. The big takeaway for me today is AI is not about replacing finance teams. It's about giving time back and much better scale. Much better control when you scale. So today, just to recap what we've covered, why AI matters and how it's affecting finance leaders. We gave really good practical playbook with some examples on what you can do in your business to utilize the power of AI, and also why and how you should adopt AI, and that really great 90-day smart plan that you both gave. So if anyone listening in wants to sense check what this looks like, their setup, Staria and Payhawk always happy to share practical guidance based on what we've spoken about today. Love to hear from anyone needing advice around digital transformation. And I just want to thank, firstly, Joonas and Robbie for their time. You've been tremendous, and also everybody on the podcast for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Will.
Thank you.
Thanks.